3, 2, 1. Hi, it's me again. I'd like to take some time here now and talk to you about something called the data hierarchy. This draws on the work of several different writers, but it's got my own kind of spin applied to it after the fact to try to, make it more relevant to our particular world rather than purely the world of something else. So from 1978 until 2002, I worked in the world of information technology, IT. Of course, the last 5-6 years of that I was doing mostly leadership development work at 3M, and it's really more HR work than IT work, but nonetheless I was part of the IT organization. Information was our first name, but we really didn't agree on what it was that we meant by information. And that led us to a lot of problems, as it turns out, over the course of decades, because I think some people, like Obamacare and Minshire, still haven't got that sorted out, but that's a political thing. We'll stay away from that. Information was our first name. We didn't understand what we meant by it. So let me invite you to take a few seconds and think about when someone says to you, information, if you had to think of a description or a definition for information as a word, what would you say? What's your definition of information? So put this on pause for, a few seconds, and make some notes about information when you think about information. Okay, we'll start again. I assume that you actually did. I hope you actually did that. And one of the problems with this medium is that I can't ask you what you wrote down. So I'll tell you what I found when I went back and did some looking about it to try and sort out my own thinking. I went back to some textbooks that I had from studies that I had taken in information theory and computer programming, and here's what I found out. Information is, I'll write it down here for you, that which reduces uncertainty in a decision-making situation. Information is that which reduces uncertainty in a decision-making situation. If it doesn't help reduce uncertainty, by definition then, it's not information. Now that has some interesting implications for us in the context of leadership and organizations. So we're going to talk about this for a while. First of all, now that we have this special definition for information, it's going to become a reserved word. So when I talk about information going forward, it's like you need to hear it in italics or in boldface or with quotation marks or something. Information is now going to have that special meaning of something which reduces uncertainty in a decision-making situation. I can see that I'm going to have to erase this in a second, and I need to get an eraser, so I'll do that in a second. So let's take an example. There are other reserved words, by the way. Words like dialogue, words like trust that have a special meaning. We'll talk, if we haven't already, we'll talk more about those as well. So let's put this in a personal sort of level. Let's pretend that you're a runner. And over the course of running for a number of years or decades, you've got a bad knee, and you've concluded that you need to have surgery on this knee. Before you get to surgery, you might want to get someone else's idea about the surgery, what's going to be, whether it's really needed, what might be the consequences, so you might go and get a second opinion. Now, why would you do that? Why would you go and get a second opinion about the potential need for knee surgery? Well, to help you make a better decision, right? That's why you get a second opinion, to help you make a better decision, to remove uncertainty about the outcome of the surgery, the complications of the surgery, the consequences of the surgery. That's what you pay for, is the information, the second opinion, the reduction of uncertainty. If you didn't, after all, if you didn't get any new information, it wouldn't be worthwhile. I mean, if you went to another doctor to tell you the same thing as the first one, it would be a waste of time. So, oh, by the way, when you go to have that surgery, you have to sign a document. You may have had surgery, you may have looked at the top of the document, and typically it's called something like informed consent. It's not typically called data-driven consent. It's called informed consent. It should be, we're stuck with this usage now, particularly in education, of data-driven decision-making, and that's not what we want. We want information-based decision-making. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes as well. Let me stop here for a second and erase what I've got here so I can put up some more stuff. So I'm going to take a pause here and get out a handkerchief and erase it. Okay, now I'm going to draw a picture to try and help make clear this thing which I've called the data hierarchy. I'm starting by, you might want to draw this too, I suppose. I'm going to start by drawing a triangle, and I'm going to put a few layers on it, thus, okay? Okay, starting again. At the bottom we have something which I'm going to call data. Data, I'm going to define, well, some examples. 612.722.1973 data. 190 data. 120/70 data. THOMAS data. It's all just data. Lots and lots of data. Might it be useful at some point? Well, yeah. The critical question about data is, am I willing and able to store? So the critical process here is the process called store. If I'm willing and able to store it, it's data. Store it. Those things that I just read off were my father's phone number, my weight approximately, my blood pressure approximately, how to spell my mother's maiden name. Those are all potentially useful things, but they're not helping me right now make any decisions. So they're data. For you, for the kids in your classrooms, kids in your schools, you get all these test scores. You take a round of MCAT, Minnesota, whatever they're called, comprehensive test, MCTs. You get lots of numbers and you store them. It's data. It's not information, it's just data. At this point, we'll talk more about that in a few minutes as well. Now if we go up one layer in the model to something, we get to what I'll call information. Now how does data become information? Data becomes information when we do something to it and put it into the context of a decision, right? Data is that which reduces uncertainty in a decision-making situation. So I have to do something here. I'm going to call it select, but it might be I had to select it and filter it and sort it out and multiply it and divide it and other kinds of operations I might do, but somehow I got to do something to this wealth of data that I've got in order to make it relevant, in order to contextualize it for a decision that I'm going to try to make. So store data, select information. This is because it's going to be actually helpful. Now I'm going to see that there's a kind of a wiggly line separating this next boundary, because the case that I'm going to try to make is as we go up to the next layer, which is called knowledge, we move from the world of computers or external physical digital storage into biological storage. The case that I'm going to try to make is you can't have knowledge unless there's someone who knows it. That knowledge requires a knower, it requires a person. And that what happens here, if we store the data and we select the information, knowledge is about learning. We learn the knowledge. Learning is another interesting word. I really like Peter Senge's definition. You know, you all are in the learning business, right? It's about, you have a department called teaching and learning. Learning, we're to make people into lifelong learners. What the hell do we mean by learning? I really like Peter Senge's comment on this. Learning is increasing your ability to take effective action. If you can take more effective action today than you could yesterday, you must have learned something in the meantime. The reason you take this course, whether it's in how to use Quicken or how to use smart boards or how to work with leadership and organizations, is because you hope you're going to be able to take more effective action. Learning is about increasing your capability to take effective action. So we go up one more layer from learning, from knowledge. we get to one that's kind of fuzzy called understanding. And here the process is the process which I'm going to call integration or assimilation. It's about taking the stuff you've just learned and putting it together with everything else you've already learned and somehow massage it and work it around, and the goal is to come to some kind of understanding. Ah, now I get it. That kind of a light bulb kind of thing that goes on. I hope this is making sense so far. I can't test this stuff. So if you have questions about any stuff we've talked about so far, we're probably halfway through this part, go to the discussion board on Blackboard on the topic called data hierarchy and post a comment or a question or something, and I'll see if I can respond to it and help sort these things out. This is kind of an important, well, it's kind of a dumb thing to say, isn't it? It's all kind of important. This is a sort of a fundamental piece, because other stuff builds on this distinction between data and information. Half a dozen more things, kind of quickly, about this idea. One is, because information helps you make a better decision, because it reduces uncertainty, there's no such thing as information overload. That's a misnomer. Data overload is everywhere. We are awash in data. We are swamped with data. We got way more data than we can possibly use. The question is, do we have the information? Out of all the stuff that we're storing, what is it that's actually going to help us make better decisions? Because that's the point. How do we reduce uncertainty going forward? The second thing I alluded to briefly before, we have this phrase, particularly in public education, called data-driven decisions. That's baloney. We're stuck with it, but it's a baloney concept. We don't want data-driven decisions based on all this stuff down here. What we want is information-based decisions. What's going to help us make a better decision? What's going to reduce our uncertainty and help us be able to go forward? The third thing, this is sort of about the hierarchy, is there's one piece which is actually off the chart low. So I will write here. There is this stuff called noise. And noise I'll define as anything that gets in the way of our ability to, and willingness to store data. So if you're walking out of an aircraft, let's pretend you're on an aircraft and you're flying someplace to a conference. You're walking down the jetway, you get to the end of the jetway, you turn left to exit the aircraft. On one side there's a flight attendant saying, it's warm and sunny in Chicago today. And on the other side there's someone saying the flight to Cleveland leaves from gate B26 in 18 minutes. Now, which is data, which is information for you? One person is telling you flight information for a specific flight, another person is telling you weather information for where you happen to be now. Well, the answer, which is data, which is information, is it depends. What's the decision you're trying to make? If the decision is, can I walk to my car, then warm and sunny might be information, and the other stuff isn't even data because you're not even going to store that stuff about the flight to Cleveland. It's just noise. And if it gets in the way of your understanding what the weather is like, that means it's noise. It's not something you're even willing and able to store. On the other hand, if you got to haul your butt down to some different gate to get on a flight to Cleveland, then what the weather like in Chicago is of no value whatsoever. So one of them becomes noise, the other might become information. And if you're just going to go sit in the lobby and have a beer for a while, and neither one of them is information, but you might be wanting to store them, so it might be data, but it might not. So whether something is noise or data or information is extremely context sensitive. Another fourth thing about data, the data hierarchy, data information contrast. What we'd like is for our information, for organizations to be more effective. As leaders within organizations, we'd like to waste fewer resources. We'd like to make better decisions. We'd like to have things moving forward. That means we'd like to have more information flowing freely in our organizations and less data going around and no noise whatsoever going around. Well, how many emails do you get a day? How many of them contain information? And that's the problem. We have so much email, we have so much communication, a lot of which is CYA stuff. I want to make sure that no one can tell you that I didn't tell you this, so I'm going to send this note to everybody. And what do I wind up doing then? I waste everybody's time. Because now I sent it out hoping it might be information, but in fact what I've done is sentence you to a lengthy selection process to go through all the stuff that you've been sent and pick out what is actually information. So if there were a way that, let's pretend you're my boss and I'm your staff member, and I'd like to help you have less burden. I'd like to help you be more effective in your use of time and not waste time selecting stuff which is not important. What could I do? Well, I could only send you emails or give you copies of reports or post-it notes or whatever that contain actual information. But then how would I know what constitutes information for you? And so if I don't know, I send everything to everybody. That's the default operation. Again, we see the penalty for that. But again, get back to the question, how would I know what might be information for you if you're my boss and I'm your staff member? Well, the only way that I can really have a clue about what might be information for you is if you tell me what decisions you're facing. Because if you tell me what decisions you're facing, then I can take all the stuff that I know and say, oh, this might be helpful, this might be useful. This other stuff is not going to help at all. It's just going to chew up bandwidth. It's just going to be noise. But here's something which might actually help my boss make a better decision. Or if I'm the boss, here's something which might help my staff members make a better decision. So it's about knowing what kinds of decisions we're looking at as an organization, as individuals, which is going to allow us to increase the flow of information and decrease the flow of noise. In engineering, we call this increasing the signal to noise ratio. Getting more and more signal, getting more and more information through, and less noise going through. Now, of course, I'm not going to tell you what decisions I'm facing. My camera is blinking. I think my battery's running low. I'm not going to tell you what decisions I'm facing if I don't trust you. I need to trust you that you're not going to go out and mock me behind my back and say, you wouldn't believe what Ayers, he's troubled by this decision, this is really silly, he must be a total jerk or a total lightweight or something. There needs to be that kind of trust where I can tell you what decisions I'm facing, you can tell me what decisions you're facing, and we can share information. That gets back to why trust is so central in organizations. I'm going to change the battery in my camera. Okay, a new battery is installed. We'll see how far we get this time. So, where were we? We were talking about trying to increase the flow of information, decrease the amount of noise, and simple data being transferred around organizations. Another thing about the data hierarchy as a model, as a way of looking at things. We can work up the model or we can work down the model. As we go up the model, going from like this, from data to information to knowledge to understanding, what we're really doing is synthesizing. So I'm going to call that synthesis. It's about putting things together. It's about combining things and merging things and rearranging things in order to synthesize them, to put them together. So being a synthetic thinker is actually a compliment. The opposite direction, going down, is called analysis. And it's about taking things apart. It's about taking my understanding and helping me disassemble my understanding and transfer it to you, I hope. So what I will do is say, well, here's how I understand things, and here's what I've learned in the process, and here's some information which might be relevant, and then it comes across into your brain, and now you take it and run up the ladder with it, and synthesize it and say, I see, that's helpful, let me turn that into knowledge, let me turn that into understanding. So we go down, it's called analysis, we go up, it's called synthesis. Some people, say this whole thing is a bunch of baloney, this data versus information crap, you're just arguing semantics. And my position as a recovering English major and as a recovering IT guy is, yes, you're right, it's only semantics. And semantics only matters if we actually want to understand one another, if we want to communicate, if we want to understand the words meaning the same thing. That's all about semantics. So let's go back to those student test scores for a second. Kids take tests, they get scores, we store them. They take lots of tests, we get lots of scores. It seems like more and more and more of them. Now, so what? Why do we keep them? Because we need practice at storing data? I mean, do we have like empty servers someplace so we could just fill them up with stuff? I hope that's not the case. So with this distinction now between data and information, the question is, what do we need to do to take the data and turn it into information? And the answer gets back to this. We need to store it with the hope or expectation it's going to be useful at some point, but then we need to do something with it. We need to select it and sort it and process it and filter it and do something with it in order to make decisions. Because at its base, that's what differentiated instruction is all about. That's what differentiated leadership is all about. What's the information I have that's relevant to the decisions I need to make now in this moment? And how can I use the data that I've got? What do I need to do to transform it into information to make a better decision and a better decision and a better decision so that I'll be more effective, my organization will be more effective, and we can go forward. To tie it back to an earlier topic with the awareness wheel, the sensory data, that's just data. It's just what I smelled or saw or heard. What I got with my senses, it's just data, and I stored it. In order for that to be helpful in coming to address an issue and make a decision about going forward, I need to give that some context, and specifically, what do I think it means? What are my thoughts about that data? How do I feel about this issue? And in the context of delivering a full message so we can hopefully achieve some kind of resolution of an issue and move forward. It's about decision making. Someone once described work as what you do between decisions. The work gets you from this decision to the next decision to the next decision, and that's what organizations and leadership are partly about. So, again, if you have questions about this, if it isn't clear, please post a note to the Blackboard discussion board, and we'll try to address them that way. Otherwise, if you want to hang on to the question and bring it up at a class when we're actually in the same room at the same time at the same place, instead of this talking to a camera across the room stuff. See you later.